Right now, as I'm speaking to you, tons of cocaine and methamphetamine are moving beneath the U.S. Mexico border. Not across it, beneath it. While 10,000 Mexican soldiers patrol the surface, the Sinaloa cartel is operating an industrial-scale logistics network 60 to 80 feet underground. A network of sophisticated tunnels that represent the crown jewel of North American narcotics trafficking. And here's what you need to understand. The Mexican government knows how to find these tunnels. They know how to shut them down, but they won't.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Welcome to Borderland Narcosis, an Ironclad original presented by First Form. All right, today we have a special bonus episode. What you're about to hear is a message from Pierre Rausini, a fan favorite and someone our audience always wants to hear more of. In this recording, Pierre breaks down his perspective on why he believes Mexico's troop deployment at the border are mostly political theater, how cartel tunnels keep operating right under them, and why he thinks the U.S. has tools it's not using to actually disrupt the Sinaloa cartel's operations. He even walks through the framework he believes could force real change in the flow of drugs across the border. Just to be clear, these are Pierre's opinions, not verified facts, not Borderland's official position, just food for thought we think you'll appreciate.
My name is Pierre Rausini. I'm an author, content creator, and open source intelligence analyst. But before that, I was a drug trafficker based in Los Angeles, the primary American base of operations for both the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels. I was prosecuted under the federal drug Kingpin statute for my role in what the government characterized as wide-ranging drug conspiracies. During my time in federal prison, as a non-Mexican Latino, I lived alongside operatives and leaders from both cartels. This gave me something that traditional intelligence gathering and academic study simply cannot provide: direct access to how these men think. I gained firsthand knowledge of their operations, their hyper-rational mindset, and the cultural dynamics that drive them, and most importantly, what they truly fear. Insights no academic or outsider could ever access. Now, post-release, I use that lens to analyze and expose the truth. I don't glorify the trade, I dismantle the myths. Today, I'm going to share a blueprint that no government official, no academic, and no journalist can give you. Not because they lack intelligence or dedication, but because they lack the insider perspective that only comes from having been a part of this world. I'm going to expose the single most disingenuous act the Mexican government has perpetrated in the last 5 years. And I'm going to present the most effective strategy to cripple the Sinaloa cartel's subterranean operation in the Tijuana-San Diego corridor. I call it the Rosini cross-border search offensive. Before I expose the deception and present the solution, you need to understand the dynamics of the trade. The United States and Mexico share a 2,000-mile border, deeply rooted in trade, cultural, and demographic ties. San Diego and Tijuana are twin cities in every sense, together forming a metropolitan area of more than 5 million people. They share one of the world's busiest, most dynamic, and most economically integrated borders. For over 3 decades, the Tijuana-San Diego corridor has been considered one of the crown jewels for drug smuggling into the United States. 2 ports of entry dominate this corridor, San Isidro and Otay Mesa. Separated by just 12 miles, these crossing points serve as the primary smuggling routes, given their strategic positions and the sheer volume and complexity of the legitimate northbound traffic. Now, the Sinaloa cartel, one of 2 most powerful criminal organizations in Mexico, doesn't put all of its eggs in one basket. They run a diversified smuggling portfolio consisting of 3 distinct independent cells in Tijuana. There's the overland importation operation using tractor-trailers. There's another overland importation operation utilizing private civilian vehicles modified with hidden compartments. And then there's the crown jewel, the subterranean operation utilizing sophisticated cross-border tunnels. This cellular autonomy is a core principle of risk management. If one supply chain gets compromised, it doesn't expose the knowledge, personnel, and logistics of the others. Each cell operates independently. Each cell continues functioning even if another gets rolled up. Today we're focusing on the narco tunnels because that's where the highest volume, highest value shipments move. And that's where the Mexican government's deception becomes most obvious. In February 2025, after President Trump threatened crippling tariffs on the Mexican economy, the Mexican government made a big dramatic show of securing the border. They deployed over 10,000 National Guard troops with a single clearly stated mission: prevent drug trafficking from Mexico to the United States, particularly with respect to synthetic opioids. Secure our border, they said. Dismantle the cartels, they promised. Stop the illicit flow of drugs. Cable news ate it up. Politicians on both sides of the border declared progress. The optics were absolutely perfect. But here's the reality. It was political theater. a carefully choreographed performance designed to placate American pressure while changing absolutely nothing about the cartel's core operations. Those soldiers are patrolling the surface. The tunnels run 60 to 70 feet below ground. Some reports push that depth to 80 feet or more, deliberately chosen to penetrate beneath the effective range of most ground-penetrating radar and below any physical border barriers or foundations. The military presence is a surface defense against the subterranean threat. They are quite literally marching in the wrong dimension of the conflict. While those troops chase low-level pedestrian mules and intercept migrant, multi-ton shipments worth hundreds of millions of dollars flow unimpeded beneath their boots. The Mexican government surged military assets to the border to address migrant crossings and to chase small-time drug runners, while the multi-ton, multi-hundred-million-dollar cartel-level shipments of cocaine, methamphetamine, and synthetic opioids flow unimpeded beneath the surface. This isn't incompetence, this is design. The Mexican government cannot afford to genuinely disrupt the drug flow. And I need you to understand why, because this is the key to everything. The drug trade in Mexico generates billions of dollars in illicit profits annually. A significant portion of that money, billions, is recycled back into the Mexican elite through bribes, kickbacks, and illicit campaign financing. The Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels aren't merely tolerated by the Mexican state. They're partners in the state's political economy. This is what I call the corruption economy. Disrupting the tunnel operations, the most efficient logistics lane for smuggling multi-ton shipments, would choke cartel cash flow. That means the cartels lose their ability to pay the requisite protection fees to the politicians, generals, and police commanders who safeguard their operations. This is the logic of controlled corruption. The elites take the bribes. In return, they ensure that law enforcement actions remain highly targeted and ultimately non-disruptive to the cartel's strategic infrastructure. The surface deployment is the perfect safe action. It addresses public perception, it creates images for television, it disrupts low-level independent drug runners who compete with the cartels, but it leaves the cartel's actual profit engine, the subterranean network, completely intact. So those 10,000 soldiers aren't enforcement, they're a dog and pony show. A carefully engineered smokescreen designed to maintain the lucrative corrupt status quo while creating the appearance of decisive action for American consumption. The American government is fighting a geopolitical deception designed by corrupt elites to protect cartel profit margins while simultaneously undermining low-level competitors and increasing the cartel's market share. This is the most disingenuous act the Mexican government has perpetrated in the last 5 years, and it's happening right now. Now let me explain what we're really dealing with, because understanding the sophistication of this infrastructure is critical to understanding why my solution works. Since 1989, the dawn of the modern cartel era 36 years ago, nearly 200 cross-border tunnels have been discovered in California and Arizona. 95 of those were in San Diego alone. But these discoveries represent a small fraction of the total network. For every tunnel found, several more remain operational. The emergence of sophisticated narco tunnels beneath the border isn't random. It's a direct response to sustained technologically driven efforts by the United States. As surface security increases, the cost of interdiction rises, leading to a commensurate increase in the value of drugs smuggled across the border. This creates a geopolitical arbitrage spread, the widening gap between the low-value manufacturing point in Mexico or Colombia and the high-value distribution market in the United States. This spread provides a massive, sustained financial incentive for capital-intensive innovation. The tunnels are concentrated in Otay Mesa, directly opposite Tijuana's industrial zone. This location wasn't chosen randomly. It represents strategic genius. Otay Mesa is the second largest commercial crossing in the United States. The area features soft, alluvial geology that's significantly easier to excavate than harder rock formation. There's existing industrial infrastructure on both sides of the border, warehouses that provide perfect cover. And there's massive, legitimate cross-border commerce that masks the noise, movement, and activity associated with tunnel construction and smuggling operations. Think about it. Constant truck traffic, loading dock activity, heavy equipment moving around. The operational signature of a tunnel blends seamlessly into the legitimate commercial activity. The evolution of these tunnels perfectly illustrates a development cycle, an iterative, decentralized learning process where each law enforcement countermeasure becomes the stimulus for the cartel's next innovation. The earliest tunnels were crude, hand-dug, structurally unstable, designed for short-term use because they frequently collapse. They were basic holes in the ground. But the frequent collapse of these early tunnels, coupled with the need for reliable high-volume transit, drove a fundamental shift towards structural integrity and engineering sophistication. 25 years ago, Sinaloa made a strategic pivot that changed everything. They began recruiting specialized labor, mining engineers, civil engineers, construction foremen, geological experts. They introduced technical solutions, Geologists began conducting soil analysis to determine optimal routing, engineers oversaw structural design. The cartels essentially created an underground construction firm dedicated to a single purpose, moving drugs beneath international borders. Today, the super tunnels being discovered are highly engineered, sophisticated subterranean infrastructures that reflect a persistent organizational commitment to solving a complex logistical problem. Recent discoveries in the Otay Mesa area show tunnels exceeding 4,000 feet in length. That's over 3/4 of a mile. These tunnels are equipped with extensive rail systems for high-speed transport. They have forced air ventilation to provide breathable air at depth, high-voltage electrical wiring for lighting and equipment, complex drainage systems to handle groundwater seepage, and fiber optic communications for real-time coordination. The most successful tunnels are routinely discovered at depths of 60 to 70 feet below the surface. Some reports push that figure to 80 feet. This depth is deliberately chosen to penetrate beneath the effective range of most ground-penetrating radar systems and below any physical border walls or structures. The tunnels typically link from concealed entry shafts in Tijuana, hidden in warehouses or residential homes, to legitimate-looking industrial warehouses in Otay Mesa. The entry shafts are concealed beneath concrete floors, often hidden by sophisticated mechanical cover systems, steel plates moved by hydraulic lifts, camouflaged under pallets of equipment. Now, constructing a modern supertunnel isn't a low-cost operation. It's a major capital investment. Estimates for a single tunnel can easily reach $2 million in construction costs alone: materials, excavation equipment, specialized labor wages. Factor in the cost of purchasing warehouses on both sides of the border, establishing companies to provide operational cover, and you're looking at $5 million or more per tunnel. But here's the critical calculation that makes this investment rational. The rail systems facilitate the movement of multi-ton shipments in a single high-speed traverse. One run, multiple tons, hundreds of millions in wholesale value. The cost per kilogram smuggled via a successful tunnel, averaged over its operational lifespan, is vastly lower than the cost and risk associated with surface smuggling. The profit generated from a single multi-ton payload of cocaine or methamphetamine moved securely through a tunnel quickly amortizes the entire construction cost. This makes the tunnel not just viable, but a rational, fiscally sound investment that prioritizes efficiency, volume, and supply chain resilience over marginal cost saving. And here's the kicker. Sinaloa is known to construct and operate multiple parallel tunnels simultaneously. They run a 3-tunnel array. When one tunnel gets discovered and decommissioned by the authorities, the cartel immediately shifts operation to a parallel route. Minimal disruption, zero downtime. This is why surface enforcement is meaningless. The infrastructure allows the Sinaloa cartel to maintain high supply stability regardless of interdiction efforts, underpinning its market dominance. By utilizing tunnels, the subterranean operation transformed the cartel's business model from low-tech trafficking into industrial-scale logistics. So now that you understand the dynamics, let me present the solution. The Rosini Cross-Border Search Offensive is a 6-week operational framework engineered to dismantle the entire high-volume infrastructure utilized by the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels within the Tijuana-San Diego corridor. This plan is specifically designed to bypass Mexico's endemic institutional corruption and target the physical operational infrastructure directly. The framework proposes a decisive, time-bound, blanket search of every civilian structure, every warehouse, every residence, every commercial property within a 9/10 of a mile tactical corridor of the border in Tijuana. The objective is singular: identify every entrance shaft for every narco tunnel known and unknown. The plan leverages 3 strategic components working in concert. First, constitutional asymmetry between U.S. and Mexican law. Second, a military-civilian partnership centered around Mexican Navy Special Forces and American fire marshals. Third, the cartel's own rational, profit-driven business calculus weaponized against them. Let me break down each component in detail. Component 1. Exploiting constitutional asymmetry for tactical advantage. Here's the fundamental challenge with narco tunnels. You can't disrupt them from the U.S. side effectively because of constitutional protections. The Fourth Amendment severely restricts large-scale searches. You need probable cause for each individual property, individual warrants, due process protections. This creates an insurmountable legal barrier to conducting a systematic blanket search. The cartels know this. That's why they deliberately operate from the Mexican side, where the entry shafts are concealed. But here's the critical asymmetry. The Mexican Constitution lacks a Fourth Amendment equivalent that rigidly restricts searches based on probable cause, in the manner of U.S. law. By focusing the search operation exclusively on the Mexican side of the border, targeting the source of the entry shafts, the plan legally bypasses the procedural hurdles that would paralyze a similar operation on U.S. soil. Now, conducting a blanket search of civilian property within the corridor will create an immediate domestic and political crisis in Mexico. Property owners will object, local lawyers will file injunctions, judges will issue restraining orders. But President Sheinbaum has the legal authority to preempt all of this through executive action. She can issue an executive decree based on Mexico's national security law, specifically Article 5, Section 3, combined with Article 89, Section 6 of the Mexican Constitution, which expressly empowers the president to preserve national security. This decree grants full jurisdictional access to the relevant civilian structures and preempts all local legal obstructions. The 6-week operational timeline is secured by executive order at the highest level. And here's the political justification that makes this palatable. The decree is explicitly predicated upon the urgency of averting the activation of catastrophic United States tariffs. This frames the operation not as an attack on Mexican sovereignty or property rights, but as an economic necessity to preserve the bilateral relationship and protect Mexico's economy. The high leverage target is simple. Tunnels are only useful if they have a discrete entry shaft. By conducting a systematic search of every structure within the corridor, you force the cartel into a total risk scenario. Find the entry shafts, neutralize the tunnels. All of them, regardless of depth, length, or sophistication. Component 2. The good faith mechanism using American fire marshals. Here's the dilemma. The presence of U.S. military or law enforcement personnel operating on Mexican soil is politically untenable for the Mexican government. It violates sovereignty. It creates domestic political backlash. It's a non-starter. But for the results of this systematic search to be deemed reliable by the United States, the composition of the search teams cannot be limited solely to Mexican military or law enforcement personnel. Why? Endemic corruption. We simply cannot trust that properties will be genuinely cleared rather than given a pass because someone got paid off. So a U.S. role in the execution of the plan is vital, but it has to respect Mexican sensitivities. The answer is elegant. The Mexican government formally invites the U.S. government to dispatch teams of civilian fire marshals to embed alongside the Mexican search teams. Not soldiers, not DEA agents, not intelligence operatives, fire marshals. President Trump can ask California Governor Newsom to recruit 400 fire marshals from the Los Angeles and San Francisco Bay areas. Mr. Trump then deputizes them as federal officers for jurisdictional purposes throughout the 6-week operation. These fire marshals embed with Mexican Navy Special Forces during every search operation. Why fire marshals specifically? Because they possess exactly the expertise required for this mission. Fire marshals are experts in structural integrity assessment. They understand building codes, load boarding structures, and architectural anomalies. They're trained to identify hidden compartments, concealed voids, and structural modifications. They understand HVAC systems and can identify unusual ventilation configurations. They understand high voltage electrical infrastructure and can spot unauthorized power draws. They're skilled in forensic examinations of buildings. These are precisely the specialized, high-level technical competencies prerequisite for detecting and breaching a concealed tunnel shaft entrance. Think about what a tunnel requires. Sophisticated ventilation systems, high-voltage electric systems, structural reinforcement to prevent collapse. Fire marshals are trained to find exactly these signatures. And they bring technological force multipliers that Mexican forces lack. Advanced ground-penetrating radar systems capable of detecting voids and anomalies deep underground. Sophisticated thermal imaging technology to detect e-signatures emitted by active ventilation units and electrical systems. Atmospheric monitoring equipment to identify anomalous gas concentrations. This essential high-technology component justifies the United States presence as a function of technical expertise and cooperative analysis, not territorial occupation, not military intervention. The operational nomenclature should be officially reframed not as a military or police interdiction, but as a, quote, joint structural integrity and public safety inspection, close quote. This non-military, public safety-oriented terminology is significantly less incendiary to the Mexican population. The fire marshal's presence serves multiple functions. It overcomes the trust deficit by providing unambiguous, high-visibility proof of good faith on Mexico's part. It guarantees professionalism. Properties deemed clear by Mexican teams are cleared to American standards of inspection, bypassing corruption-induced negligence. And it respects Mexican sovereignty by using civilian technical specialists rather than military personnel, making the invitation politically palatable for the Mexican executive branch. Component 3. Neutralizing the endemic corruption concern. We need to be realistic. Systemic corruption pervades the political, military, and local law enforcement elite in Mexico. This is not speculation. This is documented reality. This corruption will inevitably result in compromise and anticipatory leakage of the operational plan. Corrupt officials will warn their cartel affiliates. The cartels will know the United States is coming. But we bypass the institutionalized corruption through exclusive deployment of specific Mexican units, the Mexican Navy Special Forces. These units are internationally recognized for minimal incidents of compromise. They have documented success in high-value target interdiction. They maintain a sustained collaborative history with U.S. federal agencies, including the DEA and Special Operations Command. The Mexican Navy Special Forces maintain institutional insulation from the political decay observed in other Mexican enforcement entities. This condition is predicated upon their distinct organizational history and an esprit de corps cultivated through stringent United States-backed vetting and training programs. They're not immune to corruption, no organization is, but they represent the least compromised force available in Mexico. With U.S. fire marshals embedded alongside every search team, the integrity of the operation is protected at the ground level. Even if corrupt officials leak the plan to cartels, even if warning is given, the actual execution remains insulated from direct compromise. The Mexican Navy Special Forces operators are mandated to proceed with professional precision, independent of external political pressure. And the fire marshals ensure every property is genuinely searched to American standards. Now, the fact that the plan will leak, that cartels will receive advance warning, isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Let me explain why advance warning actually strengthens the plan. It is an operational certainty that corrupt officials will disseminate the plan details to Sinaloa and Jalisco leadership. They'll learn about the blanket search encompassing the entire 9/10 of a mile corridor. They'll know it will be executed by vetted, highly trained, incorruptible teams accompanied by U.S. federal experts equipped with advanced detection technology. This deliberate advance notice serves as a powerful psychological deterrent. It creates what military strategists call shock and awe. The cartels face an impossible logistical challenge. They're structurally incapable of reliably or rapidly sanitizing dozens of properties in a matter of days. Think about what that would require. Discreetly collapsing multiple shafts without attracting attention, removing all evidence of construction, disposing of equipment and materials, restoring concrete floors to pristine condition. All of this across multiple locations in a compressed time frame while maintaining operational security. It's insurmountable. So the massive operational footprint imposes an ultimate strategic choice on the cartels. Acquiesce to structural asset forfeiture or risk escalation that threatens the entire organizational survival. The intelligence leakage is thus transformed from an institutional liability into a critical strategic component of psychological leverage, effectively compelling systemic compliance. Now, the fire marshals embedded with Mexican search teams are soft targets, non-military civilians, vulnerable to attack by the cartel's paramilitary forces. This is a reasonable concern, but it is misguided. And this is where the cartel's defining characteristic, their rational, profit-driven, risk-averse mindset, becomes the plan's most robust defensive measure. Cartels are economic entities, not ideological insurgencies. They don't operate on principles or martyrdom. They operate on cost-benefit analysis and risk management. Harming a U.S. federal officer, even a deputized non-military fire marshal who has been formally invited onto Mexican soil by the Mexican government, crosses a critical line in the cartel's strategic calculus. It would trigger an overwhelming, decisive, and potentially unilateral kinetic response from the U.S. administration. Not just economic tariffs, not just financial tariffs, military intervention, drone strikes on cartel leadership, special operations raids, comprehensive, systemic financial targeting of the entire command and control structure. This would jeopardize the cartel's entire organizational existence. But here's the critical insight. The cartels themselves won't make this calculation alone. The corrupt political, military, and law enforcement elites who act as the cartel's protectors, who control the cartel's political oxygen, and who receive the protection payments are the most motivated actors to ensure this red line is not crossed. Their entire system of illicit wealth depends on maintaining a functional, if tense, diplomatic and economic relationship with the United States. If that relationship ruptures, if U.S. military intervention occurs, their protection racket collapses. Their financial networks get exposed. Their political careers end. So these powerful patrons will maximally apply their institutional influence to explicitly communicate to leadership of both Sinaloa and Jalisco. Sacrificing the tunnel array is the non-negotiable cost to avert total existential war with U.S. military. This trade-off, losing capital in the form of tunnels to preserve the entire enterprise, is a rational calculation they are guaranteed to make. For multi-billion-dollar organizations, a $5 million tunnel array is a replaceable operational expense. Substantial, yes, but an acceptable financial loss necessary to protect their political patrons and avoid the massive leadership losses that would follow U.S. military intervention. They'll strategically absorb the loss. They'll preserve their organization, and they'll wait for the Trump administration's term to conclude before attempting to rebuild. That's the rational calculation, and rationality is what these organizations are built on. So let's talk concrete outcomes and timeline. The systematic search phase, executed by sufficient manpower over 6 weeks, achieves what I call initial operational paralysis of high-volume drug flow within 90 days of the offensive's commencement. But the real disruption extends far beyond that initial period. The Sinaloa cartel's structural time to recover, the minimal temporal duration required to engineer and activate a comparable high-volume tunnel array, is estimated at 18 to 24 months. This extended recovery time is contingent upon several factors: recruiting specialized engineering talent, acquiring properties on both sides, establishing shell companies, conducting geological surveys, excavation, construction, and testing. And the American authorities will be targeting those engineering and design assets for interdiction post-tunnel neutralization, further extending that recovery timeline. The financial return on investment is compelling. We calculate ROI by comparing total operational expenditures, personnel costs, equipment, logistics, against the aggregated estimated wholesale value of interdicted narcotics, seized assets, and the replacement cost of neutralized infrastructure. Based on historical tunnel capacity and seizure data, we project a conservative ROI ratio exceeding 1 to 40. Think about it: 6 weeks of operations, 400 fire marshals at federal pay rates, Mexican Special Forces units already on government payroll, ground-penetrating radar equipment, thermal imaging, logistics, and support. Compare that expenditure to the economic devastation of reciprocal tariffs on the entire Mexican economy, or the cost of maintaining a 10,000-soldier deployment that accomplishes nothing for months or years. This isn't just cost-effective, it represents the only viable path to immediate, material, and measurable disruption of high-volume drug flow through the Tijuana-San Diego corridor. So here's where we are. The Mexican government deployed 10,000 soldiers in a carefully choreographed performance to create the appearance of action while deliberately protecting the actual infrastructure that generate cartel profits. Those soldiers aren't defending the border, they're defending a political narrative. They're defending a corrupt system. They're marching right over the top of the financial pipelines that enrich the very elites giving them their orders. This isn't a failure of competence, it's a success of collusion. It's a masterclass in geopolitical deception. But within the theater of asymmetric warfare, the combination of economic annihilation through tariffs and the credible threat of U.S. military intervention are tools powerful enough to compel even a deeply compromised state to align its incentive with ours. The Rosini cross-border search offensive is rigorously constructed upon these principles. It exploits constitutional asymmetry to bypass legal obstacles. It deploys incorruptible military units to overcome institutional corruption. It embeds U.S. civilian experts to ensure verification and respect sovereignty, and it weaponizes the cartel's own rational business model against them. The United States government targets the operational choke point, the entry shaft, with high-integrity teams and unassailable diplomatic protection. We force the cartels to a singular, unavoidable choice: absorb the cost of tunnel loss to preserve the larger organization, or force complete systemic collapse under U.S. economic and military retaliation. They will choose survival. They always do. Because they're not ideologues. They're businessmen. Criminal businessmen, but businessmen nonetheless. This plan is politically substantiated, militarily sound, and economically justifiable. It turns political vulnerabilities into strategic assets through executive authority and technological superiority. The framework is ready. The legal mechanisms exist under Mexican law. The personnel are available. The technology is proven. All that's required is the political will to execute. As we speak, the next multi-ton shipment of fentanyl is being loaded into a tunnel system beneath Tijuana. It will cross into the United States beneath the feet of those 10,000 soldiers, proving once again that their deployment isn't counter-narcotic strategy, it's political theater designed to protect corrupt interests. Or we implement this plan. The American government shuts down the crown jewel of the Sinaloa cartel's logistic network. We force an 18 to 24-month recovery timeline, materially disrupting the flow of fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine into the United States. The blueprint is in front of you. The choice belongs to those with the power to act. But make no mistake, the clock is running. And every day you delay is another day that industrial-scale drug logistics operates unimpeded beneath our feet.